Through those partners that I've mentioned, the financial institutions were able to reach 2 million smallholder farmers through them. Then that informs, say, an intervention we have, and then we say, let's equip the loan officers with a handheld device. When they're in the field, they can take all this data, send it quickly to head office. Head office makes a decision and they tell Mona, the farmer, that you're either going to borrow or you're not. The other thing that I'm very proud of the work that we have done is our focus on sustainability. Key and central in our interventions, and we're trying to ensure that we deal with the issue of technology and AI. You need to see what's ahead, what's in the future, and try and bring it. So how do we do this step? All this has been facilitated by our shareholders, who are the governments of Denmark through the Royal Danish Embassy here in Uganda. You have the European Union and the Investment Fund for Developing Countries.
What challenge do you see that is, I would say, repeatedly coming up?
The refugees are not a burden. They are a potential market for fast-moving consumer goods, for the dairy, for the produce you're growing. So you ignore them at your own risk. Help make them viable. I wish I'd known about it and started with it earlier.
Welcome to the show, Mona. You come very highly recommended. I'm very excited to have you on the show. To start off, please introduce yourself for our viewers.
Thank you for having me. As you've stated, my name is Mona Muguma-Ssebuliba, and I'm the Chief Executive for aBi Finance Limited. aBi Finance is a development finance institution that works largely through partnerships, and our key partners are financial institutions, with the aim of deepening access to finance for the agribusiness sector, but with a focus on smallholder farmers and agribusinesses. So for us, partnerships with the financial services sector is critical, right all the way from the central bank to the Uganda Bankers Association and its member institutions. So those are the financial institutions, tier 1, 2, 3. Then the Association for Microfinance Institutions, AMFIU, because then we also work with the SACCOs, the tier 4 institutions. And through them, we're able to deepen access to financial services for the agribusiness sector.
So for a person who is hearing this for the first time, aBi Finance, for the agriculture sector, what do you actually do for the farmer or for an individual?
Now, the individual, the smallholder farmer, the agribusiness is unlikely to know of aBi Finance. Why? We're in the background.
Okay.
Think of us as a wholesaler. So they interface with the retailers, who are the financial institutions, your Stanbic, Centenary Bank, Opportunity Bank, and the various SACCOs that we work with. So those are the ones they interact with. So those are our partners. So we work with them, if you like, behind the scenes to ensure that they're delivering on their mandates. Specifically, our focus is the agribusiness sector. You might ask, why are we focused on the agribusiness sector? When you look at the capital allocation, and by that I mean financial capital, when you look at it in Uganda, agriculture tends to come 4 when it's doing well, can get to 5 and 6. Most financial institutions are looking for a return and they're managing their risks. So they tend to go for, 1, government paper. They tend to lend to salaried individuals. They like the real estate sector, which you're in, and manufacturing in general, before they consider agriculture. Why? And not to downplay, it has its vagaries and risks that come with it. So when they're doing their allocation in terms of risk return, you find that agriculture falls down in the pecking order 4, 5, 6. So our focus, therefore, is to uplift agriculture and make it that much more attractive and palatable. Why? Again, you ask, why are you focusing on agriculture? We're an agrarian society, and we're starting with what we have on our journey to transformation. So we're focused on the sector that's employing the majority of Ugandans, that's feeding us, feeding the world, to ensure that it is thriving and doing its best. Even as we've discovered oil and are broadening and diversifying our sectors, which is good, the issue is not to forget the agricultural sector and, for instance, suffer the fate of the Dutch disease. So back to what we do. So I've given you why we focus on agriculture. We work in partnership with the financial services actors, as I've mentioned, even the insurance companies, to de-risk the sector, because as you know, it is fraught with all manner of risks which have been aggravated by climate change, which we'll get into. So we work with them to build their own capacities. Let me start with the capacity building. You'd be surprised that lending to an agriculture sector is completely different to a personal loan, a salaried loan, the real estate sector. You need to take into account and have knowledge of the seasons, planting and harvesting. So for instance, if you've lent to somebody who has borrowed to plant coffee, you have to give them a lead time before they can repay, because the plants are in the ground and growing to mature. So how you structure that product is different. And you'd be surprised that without that knowledge and without bringing it to the fore, they could structure it as they are with a salaried loan, where they expect installments to be paid monthly. An installment loan for agriculture is quite different. The installments are placed differently. There's also understanding generally which regions, which soils do what with what. So when a loan officer receives an application, say to grow apples in, say, northern Uganda, is that the right place to grow apples, or do you want to take them to a colder climate? That type of thing. So you have to have that basic knowledge. You have to have the knowledge, or even at least look for the knowledge around the soils. What the soils in a particular area. If you're in Mubende, what are the soils like and what do they support best? So that you don't take any application on a harebrained idea that might not work. So there's giving them the specific knowledge and expertise, or how you manage the risks. For instance, if you're lending to a coffee farmer, then you ask them, have you planted shed trees? So have you made provision for shed trees? Have you made provision for irrigation? Because you'd hate to come towards harvest only for a drought to come about.
Yes.
You have no shed trees, there's no irrigation in place, and you lose an entire harvest that was coming to maturity in the 3rd or 4th year. And then you're dealing with a farmer who can't pay back their loan, and then the loan officer is dealing with a distressed portfolio. And if they don't learn to be proactive and encourage these things in their monitoring, we talked about shade trees. Where are they? Because if you don't, never mind that you might have agricultural insurance. Better prevention than cure. So they have to have that type of knowledge. So in terms of building capacity, that is a big thing of what we do. Climate change has come and is such a disruptor. The meteorological data that we have is all over. 2024 apparently was the hottest year over the last 10 years, but the data before that didn't indicate that. You're seeing what's happening in America, in LA, being aggravated by a prolonged drought. You understand? So climate change has been such a disruptor, and we're building capacities about, let's appreciate climate change. What is its impact on your business? Even you in the real estate sector, for instance, what is the impact of climate change? How are you building to ensure that, for the longer, drier days and that type of thing? Same thing with agriculture. That example I've just given you around coffee. How do you make sure that the farmer is resilient? The other thing about climate change, which is unfair, and there's no fairness in this, I suppose, is that sub-Saharan Africa, the global south, Africa, is bearing the brunt of climate change. Yet, in terms of contributing to the causes of climate change, we are hardly on the scale. But there it is. We have to deal with it. We have to adapt. So we're speaking to financiers and saying, how are you making sure that your portfolios are adapting to agriculture? You have aflatoxins that have spiked in the wake of prolonged droughts brought on by climate change. Aflatoxin is now affecting things like maize, like groundnuts, and the unfortunate result of eating food that is infected with aflatoxins is liver cancer. So it's quite serious, and this is being brought on by prolonged droughts, poor drying methods for the harvested maize and groundnuts. So you've got to go down into that capacity building. A loan officer now is almost an expert in agronomy and agriculture. You understand? So you don't want to lend to someone who will grow this maize. When they take it to the off-taker, They do their tests, it's rejected because of poor quality. At the end of the day, the farmer is losing, the financial institution is losing. When they're losing, what do? They say, we are not lending to agriculture, much rather park this money in a government bond or treasury bill, or lend to a salaried earner who has a contract for 12 months. I am sure every month I'm going to deduct my money. So we had to take that focus on agriculture. You're seeing its vulnerability in the pecking order and allocation. So it's one thing to encourage them to do it. How do you help them love it, appreciate it? By helping them especially proactively manage the risks that come with agriculture, because we need to eat. It is what we have. It's a natural competitive advantage we have. We have a very good climate, very good soils, which we also mustn't take for granted. Those soils at this point, X years later from cultivating them, you need to use organic fertilizer to ensure it's still delivering. So quite a bit of a mouthful, but there we are. So that's why we focus on agriculture. So you were asking how. So the first way is building the capacity, understanding the risk management, and harnessing the potential within an area, within a garden, within a business. The next is we need to put our money where our mouth is. So it's one thing to support it, but show me with the money, show me the money. And so we provide lines of credit that are dedicated to agribusinesses and smallholder farmers that are wired through the banks. So we were having a conversation earlier about sustainability. It is market-based, and we lend them money which is only earmarked for agriculture because, as I said, from their own money and the money of their investors, they were allocating it to other sectors. So here we are as an investor saying, we want to lend you this money in a sustainable way. Can you only lend it to the agribusinesses because the other sectors are well taken care of? Can we focus on the agriculture sector? So that's one big thing that we do. We do not give free money. We do not give cheap money. It has to be sustainable. Sustainable both to the institution, sustainable both to the smallholder farmer and the agribusiness. And then we work with them to find a way of ensuring that these smallholder farmers and agribusinesses can access the money. Because guess what? There's the money being available, but they can't access it for a couple of reasons, but a major one is a lack of collateral. So we work with the financial institutions. What products can you put in place? For instance, they have group lending. They have group lending where they got together youth or women or communities that have that organize themselves in groups, and they guarantee each other that yes, we are a group, ABC group, and A at one point wants to lend A, who is part of our group, and should they default, we, B and C, will make good on that. So we are addressing the issue of lack of collateral. Why is there a lack of collateral? You say, but there's land. But it's smallholder land, informally titled, known as vibanja. Banks are unlikely to take vibanja because disposing them is difficult. You know, if you go into a village and you're trying to sell someone's chibanja, the neighbor is not going to be the one to buy it because he cannot or she cannot be seen to dancing on their neighbor's grave. You waited for me to be in financial distress and now you're buying my plot of land. So if a bank has lent, try auctioning a chibanja. Who from the city is going to come and buy a chibanja in a place that they have no relation with? So it got hard. So in lieu of, they will take the chibanja because it keeps you honest when you have something at stake. In lieu of the chibanja, but or in, not in lieu, in addition to the chibanja, can you get guarantee to happen? So they have their guarantee models that they introduce. So they attach that to their products. For instance, they'll tell them, organize yourselves. And usually you'll find that in a locality, they're able to organize themselves. They come together and they've caught on. So you find that they're usually very well organized. It's been happening for a bit. They're the ones who are, you know what, we had the cash rounds, niginas and that type of thing. So it's there. So you find that it's not an idea that the financial institution or SACCO is propagating. They're already doing it. So they even come and say, we're together if you lend us, So we work with them to modify their products to ensure that even the smallholder farmers can access loans. The other issue comes with building capacity, making agriculture investable. Even the agribusinesses that are available, the smallholder farmers that are available, don't have sufficient records. And we can't blame the financial institutions. You're lending money to a risky venture. you must make sure it comes back. And how do you assess the viability of that venture? It's the records. Show me your historical records. Show me how long you've been planting. So the issue is now, how do you get a smallholder farmer who many times is not very literate, who has been doing this informally, to present their facts and experience in a way that is making them investable and qualifies for financing. So therein is the challenge. And so you go back now with the financial institutions. We're in the background. The retailer, the borrower doesn't know about us. And we're saying, okay, so here's a grant. Here's a grant. You bring 60% of it, we bring 40%, and this is for financial literacy. Go into the communities and teach. And you have to get people to go and teach these smallholder farmers, get them through the LC systems and all those systems. Go in and teach them that you need to get an exercise book. Start talking about what you paid for your planting material, what you got, what your harvest was like. You have to teach all those things so that they can, even if it is as basic as an exercise book, which can then be transferred to Excel, the loan officer has a basis on which to
make
calculate,
a decision, yes.
How much to lend you. So that is what we do. So we do a blend of lines of credit, the guarantee support that I just described, and capacity building through technical assistance that is usually matching grants with the financial institutions. For instance, we've had to teach them about climate change, how to adapt to it, how to mitigate. We also have a role to play. We can't aggravate the situation, never mind that our emissions or contribution to the climate change issue are small. Let's not aggravate it. Don't use synthetic fertilizers, use organic fertilizers.
Plastics.
The minimum tillage, slash and burn, rather do minimum tillage, use your mulching material. So you don't want plastics on the farm because all those things are getting in the way of having good organic material, that type of thing. You have droppings from chickens, you use that, mix it in the right quantities, so you need to have the right support from an extension service provider, put it in the coffee. Then you have shade trees, don't exactly have eucalyptus because it dries water out of the environment. You want more nitrogen fixing plants like albizia for tree cover as you do your coffee farming, intercropping with maize and with beans. So yes, you're a coffee farmer, but you need to eat. There's the blending commercial and subsistence farming. It doesn't stop you from having some beans and maize alongside the coffee, the nitrogen fixing, but you also have a meal for your family as you wait on the more commercial coffee that results in that one usually helps with the long-term development. That's where you find I was in mud and water. Now we're in a cemented house with roofs. I was able to send all my kids to school. Yes, we have some beans. From the money I can then buy whatever else I need. So the whole sustainability.
Do you also work with NGOs that are already in the agriculture sector? The same way you work with banks, can you work with NGOs? Because they have that last mile reach?
That would be for our sister company, Agribusiness Development, aBi Development.
Okay.
They work with actors who are enhancing productivity production and productivity. So that's aBi Development's forte. And they're more retail in nature because indeed they're working with, say, NGOs and other actors in agribusinesses and sometimes engage with, the agribusiness actors. Our partners are the financial services. We're focused on financial services. Sometimes you have to focus. You can't be good at everything.
Yes.
Focus on that. So we said, let's deal with access to finance. Let's address the access to finance issue. So our partners are the financial services sectors. That's why I said, starting from the Central Bank, Uganda Microfinance Regulatory Authority that was absorbed under the Ministry of Finance. You have the Uganda Bankers Association and their members, AMFU, Microfinance and its members, Ukusku, the various unions. So those are our partners. So we work with the apexes, who bring us down to all their partners, and we address the issues that I have mentioned, but focusing on access to finance.
Yeah. Okay. And I did see when you did some research on this, we did see you've been in this for 10 plus years. Okay. When you look back, you've had, I'm sure, very many success stories. Do you have one that stands out for you, impacting either a community or that you can share?
Several, but I'll focus on two. Through those partners that I've mentioned, the financial institutions, tier 1, 2, 3, we've worked with over 40 over those 10 years. We're able to reach 2 million smallholder farmers through them. So those smallholder farmers will never know aBi finance. The agribusinesses will never know aBi finance. But through our products and services, the financial institution partners were able to serve 2 million, over 2 million smallholder farmers, 40% of whom were women. And we're quite proud of that. But we didn't quite articulate what we wanted or did with the youth. So in our current business plan, we're really focusing a lot on the youth as well. We've hitherto focused a lot on women. We've also focused in the last 10 years on northern and eastern Uganda, the underserved regions that were unfortunately blighted or affected by conflict. So we had 2 funding windows in the last 10 years that focused on financial institutions in northern and eastern Uganda, which were 8, and we built their capacities from the governance to refinement of their systems and processes, training their staff, and just making them fitter for purpose. So we're quite proud of the 8 financial institutions that we worked with in that respect. So those are the big things I would say from the last 10 years. But lately, the other thing that I'm very proud of the work that we have done is our focus on sustainability. And a lot of our work has focused on the environment and social inclusion. Governance is also key, but our work on sustainability. So we partnered with the Central Bank, Bank of Uganda, and Uganda Bankers Association, and together we created the ESG framework that has been adopted by the financial services sector. We're currently doing the same thing with the Association of Microfinance. Because why did we need a framework? There are lots of frameworks and many ways, and we also developed the first taxonomy that focuses on green agribusiness. So why did we need a framework? There are lots of definitions out there and lots of ways of looking at sustainability. Sustainability is using today's resources in a way that the next generation will be able to survive after we're long gone. And so it has 3 key elements: the environment, social inclusion, and governance. The environment, you're looking at climate. In our aspect, we tend to focus on climate. Social inclusion, you're looking at are women participating in access to finance, youth. What about regions? What about refugees? That's another big area for us. We're a generous country. We're hosting them. So how do we support them to make them included? If you think inclusion is no big deal, look at the unrest around the continent from the youth who are saying we need to be engaged. How do we get the action? So you can't ignore that. And given that agriculture is the biggest employer, how do we make it inclusive for youth, women, refugees, underserved region? Then you have governance. Governance, the institutions need to survive. They need to do business well. They need to be accountable to society. They need to pay their taxes, meet their statutory obligations, be ethical in their dealings, have the right products and services. That's the governance aspect. Are you training your people? You want them to lend, but do they know how to lend? That all falls in under governance. So under the ESG framework. So with the Central Bank, Uganda Bankers Association, Association of Microfinance Institutions, we're saying, let's have a standardized way of defining this so that we can compare oranges against oranges. Not a competition per se, but with your peers, you have a way of measuring progress. Yeah. So how do we define the environment? What aspects? When we say climate change, what do we mean by that? When we talk about adaptation, what do we mean? Adaptation is, say, using things like organic fertilizers. You're using things like irrigation, doing things like shed trees for cover. So that we have that. So when they're tailoring products, maybe they then have a product around irrigation equipment in the agriculture value chain. I must say our bias, given that we're agriculture business initiative, is agriculture. So they have products so that they can lend to someone who's coming to buy seeds of albizia trees to go and have shade trees. And so how do you tailor that as part of the product? So we have to have those classifications so that when you're in Pride Microfinance to Stanbic Bank to Centenary Bank to the SACCO, back in like Ruchiga Sako, back in Kabale, where I come from, when we define these things, they all mean the same thing because
Across
there's
the board.
mobility of even the clients.
True.
They have an onus to build the capacity of their clients. So they say, but when I was with Centenary Bank, that's not what they told me. But when I was, you understand what I mean?
Yes.
When I was with Stanbic, that's not what they told me. No. So let it be defined across. Because then once we have a basic definition, you can make it sophisticated as you go, but can we all have a basic definition and classification? So we're very proud of that work that we've done. And all this has been facilitated by our shareholders.
Which was my next question.
Yeah, that would be our shareholders who are the governments of Denmark through the Royal Danish Embassy here in Uganda. You have the European Union and the Investment Fund for Developing Countries, which is also a Denmark national entity. So those are the ones that have invested in aBi Finance to make it possible. And with shareholders come different priorities, and their priority has been in making Uganda resilient, Uganda's agribusiness sector resilient through adapting climate finance. So you find that that's where our focus is. So yeah, that's what we've been about. And if you talk, so when I look back at our key achievements, that would be it. The number of people we're able to reach and how we're now working on making them resilient and making the sector inclusive.
How do you know that you've actually been successful in this particular cycle? After the funding cycle and, things have happened, when you go back to do your evaluation, how do you actually know that you've been successful?
One, I'd rather use business plans other than funding cycles.
Okay.
Business plans, as you would within an organization, we do measure this impact.
Okay.
We do measure where is the money going. And so part of the capacity building we've done is, for instance, with some smaller financial institutions, the up-and-coming circles, you find that they're doing a lot of their work on Excel. That's not sustainable. So we come together. You bring 60 or 70, I bring 30, buy a management information system, put it in place. And so we've seen that develop. So now, why that is useful is you need the data to ensure that we are not lying when we say we've done what we've done. So when you ask me the 2 million people, you probably want to see the data.
Of course.
We need to have a data repository and we say, this is from our 40 financial institutions. This is what each individual institution lent this year. You can do a sample. So we do those kind of samples. So one, it starts with gathering the data and making sure that the data is accurate. So you get the data, desktop, desk receipt, they email it on a monthly and a quarterly basis. Then our teams go out to monitor, separate from the auditors who also do the auditing, but we do our own monitoring. So you say that you lent to Mona, she's of village B in Kasangati. Can we just, random sampling? Let's go have a look. They need not know who I am. Say this is aBi Finance staff. Let's pose as Stanbic staff, for instance. And then there they go. And they speak to, so yes, is this Mona? Yes. Did you, and there's always consent and prior preparation that, we're coming with some people to talk to you. So did you borrow 200,000? Yes, I did. How did that go? One, we also tried to ask, we actually ask about, was it easy to access? Then they'll be honest. It was, they'll be shy sometimes. It was, but I had to go back and forth many times. So then that informs, say, an intervention we have, and then we say, let's equip the loan officers with a palm or handheld device. When they're in the field, they can take all this data, send it quickly to head office. Head office makes a decision and they tell Mona, the farmer, that you're either going to borrow or you're not, you've been declined. And you've been declined for these reasons, or we're going to lend you and we're lending you 100,000. So the next time you need that, maybe you need to come in once to fill the forms or sign the forms, but the next time we'll wire you the money on your phone. So that's where now agency banking, digitizing comes in and supports. But yes, the data is collected, interrogated, and its impact also analyzed. For instance, we're now asking ourselves, can the financial institutions work with their customers to ensure, for instance, that the youth are buying collateral or buying agricultural equipment that can act as collateral over the years and allow them access even more financing? So they start with that group lending model, for instance, then they access money. So in what they're buying, we're saying, to what extent can they be influenced to buy value-adding and long-lasting collateral type, because they'll take moving chattels and that type of property. So you can say I'm buying a maize or coffee hulling machine, we're owning it, say even as this youth group. But you see, now owning a hulling machine gives them more skin in the game. And so we're now even starting to drill down to, but what are they borrowing for? Can they be influenced to take a decision to buy better equipment, to buy longer lasting equipment? So now we're saying, very well done. We're helping them through the guarantee model access financing. But now, how do we make them that much more resilient? How do we help them move from one income bracket to the other? So that's what data helps. So you have those impact evaluations where people, we have teams that go back and say, so Brian, you borrowed 3 years ago. How's it going? Or I still go to the bank, but where I used to borrow 300,000, I'm now borrowing 50 million. My shop, and we've seen those transformational stories where now I buy produce from different farmers, you know, the produce shops, and I now sell to schools within my area. So I've graduated from borrowing 300,000 or $1 million to now I need working capital of 100 million. We see those but you can only track that over time. So you need the data, you need the systems that keep that data safely. So data management and analysis. So it's one thing to have the data, but if you don't analyze it to help you interpret a story or trends, it's all useless. You gather it. So the issue is have the data, have it stored safely. Make sure it is also authentic. It's not cooked. So we also go back to look at, is it cooked? Are these just numbers? So you have audit coming in, giving that assurance of yes, when they say they lend to 30,000 farmers, they actually have lent to the 30,000 farmers based on this sample. You can never really see all the 30,000. So you have to do a lot of that. So yes, that's how we keep it. It's largely from data. I don't know if you've heard of the risk of greenwashing. Greenwashing being, you're saying you're doing all these things on paper, but on ground, you're not. You've heard of airlines, of car manufacturers that are saying we're cutting emissions by this, only to get it tested and no, the emissions are not cut down by that much. So how do you ensure that what we're saying is true? And it's also a constant thing for us. It's reputational for us as well. Because when I sit in front of you here and say we've reached 2 million farmers through our partners, I'm quite confident, you know. And so we pay attention to our data integrity, because it is on the back of that type of impact that other investors come to join us to ensure that we continue the good work that we're doing.
You really touched on the question I have next. When you look at the level of aBi Finance, you have the Royal Danish as supporting
investor.
Right? Yes, investor. Do you have other organizations, agencies that have seen your work and want to come and partner with you at the investor level?
Yes, we're currently in a resource mobilization phase. Unfortunately, at this point, I'm not at liberty to disclose.
Yes.
But yes, we are currently speaking. The previous ones are the ones who are now the shareholders. It started with the Royal Danish Embassy. The European Union joined, and then the Investment Fund for Developing Countries joined as investors as well as shareholders. So now we're in the process of bringing on board, because the work is enormous, and the impact that it will have is tremendous. And so you have like-minded investors who are seeking to have that impact across the continent and country, knocking at our doors. We are also knocking at their doors, telling them our story, and saying, come invest in aBi Finance because of the impact that we're having on Uganda's agricultural sector, and it helps us achieve our goals, especially in line with the National Development Plan and that type of thing, which is also inclusive into the Sustainable Development Goals. So yes. Okay.
So for the farmer in the village, the farmer should know that if I want to get an agricultural loan, I can go to the bank
or the SACCO,
and I will be able to access a fund that has been availed by aBi that is there at that bank. Correct?
Not really. I wouldn't call it a fund.
Okay.
They'll access money provided by their bank or their financial institution. We're not the only sources of finance. They borrow from us. We don't give them money for free. We're a wholesale lender. And we're a mix. So they'll mix it up with their own money, their retained earnings from other wholesale lenders as ours. So they must, that's why I say we're invisible to the smallholder farmer. We're irrelevant to them. What they need to focus on and negotiate with their bankers
is with the banks that they face.
Yes.
Okay. With the SDGs that Uganda has, how does aBi Finance tie into that?
You know, one big component of our National Development Plan is the agro-industrialization, and specifically now drilling down to our mandate is the commercialization and productivity. So aBi development focuses a lot on enhancing production and productivity. You understand? So with along with other partners, you can see how our coffee production has gone up quite a lot in the last couple of years, from 2 million bags, I think, to about 9 million bags. So that is enhancing production and productivity. Then the commercialization requires financing. That coffee farmer needs to have irrigation equipment. It needs to be financed. Can they walk into a financial institution, a SACCO, and access finance to commercialize their enterprise? Did you know, by the way, not all value chains can absorb the cost that comes with irrigation? For instance, you cannot irrigate beans and maize. The value, except unless it's on a very large scale. But with coffee, on even a small scale, investing in irrigation is very much worth it. Investing in organic fertilizer, that's all part of the commercialization. Mechanization, to what extent can we bring in more efficiencies? You've seen certain communities come together, buy a tractor that goes and opens up tracts of land. Societies buy. That society will need to access finance. You find that many of those societies turn to their SACCOs, where they are members and are saving and are then borrowing. You know, and it's interesting, the whole issue about access to finance. I think they're looking more for the finance and less about the interest rate. I'm not saying it's not important, but it is not as significant as it is of, can we just get somebody to believe in us and actually lend to us on a realistic basis? So you find many of the smallholder farmers and these agribusinesses, especially in the countryside, are members of their SACCOs. So they are lending, they're saving their money with these SACCOs, and they know that they borrow their own money at particular interest rates. At the AGM, they put their general managers to task of, how much did we make? Are you sure that's not being cheap? These are the same people. They're borrowing their own money. So they have a sweet spot. They don't want to be taken to the cleaners, but they know they must borrow it at a commercially viable rate to make their SACCO run and grow from where they can continue to borrow. So you see, they also don't expect free money, because if that was the case, you'd think that they'd be borrowing at 0% from their own money. But they know that that's not sustainable. The SACCO itself must be sustainable. It must keep its lights on, must pay its staff, must pay its loan officers who go out to make sure that the money has not been diverted and collected, because many of these you even have to go and help them actually pay via the digital channels. Okay, now put it in, I'm here, put it in, *1 this, get the money paid. How is that paid for? Through interest rates. So just ask yourself, they go and borrow their own money, which they're saving, and a bit more. You see, so there's no fund sitting about with like free money. No, it's a commercial thing. So for aBi Finance to continue doing what it's doing, needs to provide these services at a commercially viable way. You know, we have staff, all this data integrity, collect the data, have the impact done, have the staff that are verifying. I've told you about audit and assurance, has to be paid for. It has to be commercially viable. As a country, as an entity, as a people, we need to increasingly learn to be commercially oriented. Yes, but in a sustainable way. As I said, we're commercially viable and oriented, but we're thinking about women and saying, how can these be helped to access youth? What have we done about youth? There's something that is key and central in our interventions, and we're trying to ensure that we deal with it. The issue of technology and AI. We don't want to be left. As I said, you need to see what's ahead, what's in the future, and try and bring it. So how do we do this baby steps? That's the commercialization of the agriculture that we're focused on, and we're coming at it from the financing side. As I said, aBi Development is coming at it. So now aBi Development is trying to have those conversations with the off-takers, your smallholder farmers. Have you tried to engage them and organize them to make sure that they're doing things because even for the off-taker who's buying coffee or buying maize or buying grain from the farmers, you want to see them doing more scale, want to see them being more organized, as opposed to dealing with small little older farmers. Much rather they are together as a cooperative. So it's that type of work that needs to carry on in that way. Our mobile telephony penetration is already low. Forget about the smart one, just mobile telephony, katochis. Okay? So the infrastructure, the cost of delivering internet in our sub-Saharan Africa is extremely high and expensive and not as efficient as, say, you'd have in the developing nations or the developed nations. So you understand? So there's quite a bit of work to be done in partnership with so many actors. So we partnered, for instance, with the Uganda Bankers Association under the agency banking company and created an agency banking network to ensure that digitization could be a method of taking financial inclusion to the countryside and preventing people walking many kilometers or paying money for taxis and buses to go and do basic banking. But we barely scratched the surface. And it's work that must be done. And that's just moving money. That's just making sure that we try and digitize money. Now, what about AI? So we're dealing with economies that are harnessing the potentials and reaping the benefits of AI. We're doing our farming with a handheld hoe. So how do we commercialize our agriculture? How do you get those smallholder farmers to probably, those are the things that I'm thinking about. Those are the things that my team and I are thinking about. Do they come together and a couple of decimals make 2, 3, 4 acres? So now we have a collective of an acre. But we have issues of customary land and how land is parceled out that is preventing us, but which we must find a way of solutioning and overcome. Because you're dealing in a world, people who are buying your produce and stuff and now you're seeing the noise about DeepSeek. AI OpenAI has been put aside. DeepSeek. You're dealing with people who are that, and as I keep saying, you're still dealing with your agriculture being done by a handheld hoe. Even tractors are not the prevalent issue.
True.
So even tractors, then now if we move to tractors, then you're saying, is this sustainable? We're using fossil fuels. How do we make sure that we're using smarter? So at some point we should even be talking electric tractors, but we're even talking, can we just get tractors to make us more efficient? That's the commercialization aspect. You see, those are the things that keep us awake.
What is the solution to this?
You keep at it.
What is the solution?
You keep at it. You keep making the sector resilient. Advocacy and even capacity building. These are conversations that must happen. Now at the smallholder farmer level, do you want to stay with your small part, or do you want to come up as a group, get into cooperatives, organize yourselves into cooperatives, into organizations, into, so that you have synergies, so that the sum of all of you is bigger than the individual. You understand? So we must organize as a collective. I think that is one way out for us. So when you see the savings and credit cooperatives, those are good ways to start off. These VSLAs, the Village and Saving Loan Associations, those are good ways to start off. So they need not come together only for money. Now we need to talk to them about, how about putting your land together? Open it out as one big entity. Decide that, guys, we are now going to do this together. Let's go get this tractor of this acre. We each have 25 decimals. So now we know how much is in it. This is what of this seed needs to go in per decimal or whatever. And then, so we do things together. So that's the advocacy, the continued conversation.
What challenge do you see that is, I would say, repeatedly coming up, or a challenge that you had and surmounted, or one that you see that you're going to have to deal with, other than the AI and the technology?
Climate change is something that we're continuously dealing with. So have we surmounted it? No. But with one mind set change at a time, understanding and appreciating the vagaries that come with climate change and what to do about them, adapting to climate change. We're moving away from mourning about it. Right. How do we adapt? Even as we try not to make the problem worse, how do we make sure that our agriculture sector is resilient? That is big for us. That is existential, by the way.
True.
Droughts and floods, they're existential. You see what floods do. not only forget about the crops, people lose their lives.
True.
You know, so it's very existential. That one, all hands on deck. All hands on deck. As they say, the world is burning, so we need to put out the fire, and we need to make the world cooler. And so there are certain activities. So that one we've not overcome, but we're doing. So that's one big one. The other one I would say is the investability of smallholder farmers and agribusinesses, making them investable. Just making them investable from a governance point of view, records, viability. Governance is a big thing.
True.
You know, separating owners from the business and making sure this is not a personal playground and that type of thing. Professionalizing the sector, professionalizing the actors, I would say, is the next big thing, because it then supports their attractiveness and their viability for the financial institutions, not even just to lend, but even for, say, equity investors who want to take equity stakes in some of these businesses. The businesses must be professionalized and growing and investable. So I would say climate change for me is the biggest thing. The investability of the sector, then the inclusion aspects. But those are put under the climate change, the sustainability bracket. Because, you know, the other thing, it's smart business to stay focused on social inclusion. We're the youngest, among the youngest nations on earth, or the youngest continent. Now, if you don't focus in making those youth viable, you're leaving market on the table.
True.
Because the farmer is going to need a school fees loan. He's going to need a car loan. He's going to need to buy a good property like that. Think of them as aspirational. The refugees are not a burden. They are a potential market for fast-moving consumer goods, for the dairy, for the produce you're growing. So you ignore them at your own risk. Help make them viable. In any case, if you don't make them viable and part of the economic activity, they become a nuisance by way of they're frustrated.
That's a good angle. I hadn't thought of this.
Yeah, it's smart business. You ignore them at your peril. You ignore them at your peril. And a lot of our people, you know, there's that whole rural-urban migration. Stem with that, make them productive where they are, take your goods and services to them, broaden your distribution, broaden your market. So you have many of them coming to the urban centers, engaging in somewhat disguised unemployment. Productivity is low. Your youth at the height of their strength are not being as productive as they ought to be. One tip: propagating anything digital, anything innovative, by the way, is pushed by the youth. So we have youth who are not interested in agriculture production because they have made that calculation I was talking about. Handheld hoe. When somebody is being a YouTuber and doing shorts and making this money, I'm not going to be using a handheld hoe. However, they are coming in around the innovation of maybe I could be an off-taker. Maybe I could link the buyers and the sellers.
And
they're around the innovation. So the issue is to engage them for their ideas. But you must educate that mind first to be able to think strategically and how to take opportunities, to be able to, other than just watching entertainment, listening to podcasts, reading articles, seeing what's ahead. Because when they hear what's happening in the developed economies or developed spaces or the next place in the urban area, they think, what opportunity am I missing here? How can I apply it here? And then you find as a family, in fact, I think we still push it, farming as a family business. You find that the parent layer, especially the men, are the owners of the asset. And so you need to engage them as a family, because when you talk anything techie, when you talk anything innovative, they'll look at their child. Maybe explain to this fellow, he's the one who understands that stuff. You understand? When you talk about receiving the money digitally or consulting with data around meteorological data and say, let's hold on planting because it's predicted that the rains are coming 2 weeks later than planned. So you see, so you're using the youth within the home, within the society to push those. So we're even responding to that of, okay, so the youth are not really interested in this handheld home business, but they're at the innovative side of the value chain, and that's where to engage them and to propagate that within society, because that youth is going to be the adult. So with that, and then they'll look back and say, okay, so I'm doing this techie cool thing, but I still need to provide labor to my dad. But those in the garden, but those are the ones who are going to be thinking. They are the ones who propagate the idea. But you know what, guys? If all 4 families of us come together and we have a patch of land and we go and hire that tractor, it will make us this much more efficient. You see, they don't want to spend their time digging. They just want to, end of the day, what we want is cultivated land. How do we do this in the shortest time possible? By getting a tractor. What does it cost everybody? You know, making sure that, and don't make it a full tank. We only need a half tank, because if we do that, we don't make our margins. You know, you get them calculating to that. And let's get improved seed, because I don't have time to plant. And then they tell me that the seed I used was not enhanced. And so when the drought came, it got destroyed. Or when the floods came, it couldn't withstand. So you find them saying, we're not going to buy where we used to buy, or until they bring improved seed. Much rather, let's go and buy from an input dealer, a recognized input dealer, and make sure that our investment is safeguarded. So you see, they're bringing that innovation and drive to the table. So you ignore youth at your peril. You ignore women at your peril, because you can either have one productive person in the home. By productive, I mean from a financial point of view, or you can have 2. It's your choice. So make them, you see, and you have more productive people, you have more buyers, effective demand in society for consumers, for consumer goods and services. Yeah, so you ignore, then why leave swaths of a region, northern and eastern Uganda? It was not their fault that conflict visited them. Yeah, so make them viable, and as I've said, you see how all the commercial banks are there. Service, you know, you have to be on that road to just see transporters delivering drinks and sodas and that type of thing. That's a whole market waiting to be served. Just make them more effective, put more money in their pockets, help them put more money in their pockets to buy all these consumer goods and services, and we'll be well on our way to prosperity. So that it's a long way to answer that we are supporting the National Development Plan through focusing on productivity and commercialization of the agribusiness sector, taking inclusion as a whole, especially focusing on youth, women, refugees, northern and eastern Uganda. Western, central are not excluded. They're business as usual. We're carrying on with them. We're just saying these areas have not gotten the attention that they require.
Let's take another
We're
look
kind
at them.
of spotlighting them for a while. Yeah, men too are not excluded. It's the impact. It's the impact for me. It's the impact for me, and it's not just a thing for Uganda. I think it's a thing for our continent. Yes, the passion for me is we have all these resources, we have all this potential. What does it take to make us viable? So it's the impact that we're having, and as I said, affecting or working through a sector that is touching almost every Ugandan's life. You understand? We all have a connection to agriculture in one way or the other. And the reach and the people's lives that can be transformed. You get tired of traveling to developed nations and coming back to a handheld hope.
Yeah,
you understand? It's like, no, our people must be empowered and supported. We must do what we can. And by empowering and supporting, I don't want to abuse that word. And that's why I was going for the commercial viability. We're not doing handouts, and handouts are not taking us anywhere. Can we be investable? Can we sit up, take this thing seriously, and make our businesses, you, the smallholder farmer, make yourself viable. Plan and go from the next. Nobody is coming to help you with handouts. That, if they do, it's very short-term in nature. Consider it a miracle. Consider it miracle money, if you will. But for long-term sustainability, it involves working hard, applying yourself, and getting yourself there. Of course, with assistance, but yes, the commercial viability, that mindset. I have a friend who keeps saying, nobody is coming, you better do it.
Of course, yes. It's a common saying, yes.
Yes, the developed countries that we're going, that we see, were built by them.
Yes.
So nobody is going to come and develop ours for us. So what do? Crowd in all these resources. As you can see, it's foreign capital, but use it to develop your country. And it's making a return for them. It's not free. It's not free. As I said, they're shareholders. There's a dividend. There's a return that is accruing to them. So it's a commercially viable thing that they're doing as well. So let's make it a win-win. It's a win-win for the investor, a win-win for our sector, for our country.
As a lady, CEO, male-dominated industry, how does this pan out for you? What are you seeing?
What am I seeing? In certain aspects, I don't feel too different from a man, but I'd be lying to say that there are no unique challenges faced to women leaders. So I'll speak to them as this and how I propose, and I've done in my own life, and would propose for people's consideration if they find them useful. We truly are the natural go-to caregivers in society, in home. And for instance, in my own home, my own marriage, we're both working individuals. But it is funny, indeed, sometimes they will bypass their dad and bring a squabble to me to sort out. They're fighting over an orange or something, but somehow they bypass their dad and come to me. So it tells you around the caregiving, nurturing role, we still play that. And so not only does society expect it, we still want to do it. It's something that comes naturally. I want to do it. I want to nurture my children and family. And not to say my husband doesn't, but I want to play that role. So I'm not divorcing anything. So the issue is how you do it, especially given society's expectation. One, a very key thing for me is spousal support. And I wouldn't have gotten to where I have gotten or achieved or done the things I have done without my husband's support. And the support comes in one, the negotiation, and also the articulation of your plans and goals and dreams, separately and jointly. You have your separate and joint dreams. So you've got to talk about them. Okay, so you think you're going to do a master's. When are you going to do it? How are you going to do it? For instance, in my case, we chose I wouldn't travel out of the country for my master's, but I did a long-distance master's with the Edinburgh Business School. So I wanted that international exposure, but was able to get it facilitated by Mata Abacus. So you kind of have that compromise. And then class was at the weekend. So working week, I'm at work. Class was at the weekend for 3 years. So what did that mean? He was the one who was available as the parent for the weekend activity, going swimming, going this, going, just being present anywhere as a parent, because I'd leave in the morning, come back in the evening, then you take off swaths of time to do your study before your exams. So he was doing a bit of a double shift. Of course, when you're home, but you understand what I mean. He was pulling the double shift. The 3-year period came to end, and it does come to end quickly. And there I had the master's. So spousal support is critical. Talking about our plans and plan for them. He actually supported me with my first 2 installments of my master's, and then thereafter, my job aBi was able to support.
Became sustainable.
To the end, but there is the spousal support. I'm going away for a business trip. He's going away for a business trip. Okay, so that means I need to schedule my work to ensure that I'm around Uganda and Kampala for the time that he's away. You need to be talking and negotiating. Do you mind postponing this? Or can we do this in the holiday? Picking and dropping the kids. All that requires, you do this week, I do this week. All that, it is underestimated, but it is critical. You really need to sit down and plan. Even write down to the number of children. When you have them, how you have them. When you have them is critical, because for women, the time out matters. So are you going to be gone every year? Are you going to space them so that you have build up a track record at your work? That type of thing. All these things need to be planned and negotiated. So I can't emphasize partner or spousal support in my journey. It has been immense. The second is general support in the home, domestic support and systems around you. And now that works for us both, to the extent that we can limit disruptions to our day-to-day earning work. And what does that mean? The house helps and the domestic support that we have at home. To the extent that one can afford, you either have 1, 2, 3, 4, however many people choose, but to ensure that certain things carry on uninterrupted or with as little disruption as possible. In our society, there is this whole border culture. Yes. Do you have those border deliveries done? For instance, I remember there's a time I still do it when it's my turn with the grocery shopping. I particularly like doing grocery shopping. I make buy decisions, things that are off the list, just by seeing, keeping up with what's being sold, the pricing and everything. But I like doing it. But when I do it on a round trip. So I'm going to town and I'm going to do a couple of things. After I do the shopping, I have a border guy who takes the stuff home. I'm not going to do the back and the forth. True. You understand? Then there are certain things you buy in bulk so that you're not constantly in the shops. So it's really got to get down to that. Do you have one or two house helps? Why? People need to take leave. You take leave from work, even your house helps need to take leave. They might fall ill, so who will support with preparing the meals? Because you're both gone to work, you need to come back home, find the meals prepared because the kids need to be in bed by 8, they need to be up at 5 or 6 the next morning. So certain systems must work, but you can't load them on the one person. At least in our case, we can't load them on the one person. We have more than one to support with that process and allow for those times when they're on leave, they've gone to town, they're unwell, and just division of labor so that they're not tired. So as you're getting ready for work, somebody's supporting you to get the kids ready for work, because we have kids 12, 10, and 6. That age, needs quite a bit of support. So you're popping in, as you yourself are getting ready, somebody's helping you get yourselves ready so that at 5:45 every morning, you're living like clockwork to beat the town traffic because certain kids need to start class at 7:30. It's a deliberate system that you need to plan for. You need to pay them well. You need to pay them well so that they're not attracted to leave you for the next 50,000, 100,000. Pay them a good living wage that sorts out their life's issues as well. Develop them so that by the time they leave you, they're better than where you found them or picked them up, and that they are also gaining value. You make the inclusion. You cannot develop and your households are not developing. Are they buying land? Are they building houses? Are they sending their children to school? Are they able to now treat their parents? Are their lives getting better as a result of coming in contact with you? Then they'll stay. Because now with staying is trustworthiness, is knowing how things work. I recently, this long holiday, I was able to spend a lot more time with my children on leave during their holiday. So you see what the house helps have helped teach them, because believe it or not, they're your co-parents, they're teaching them. So what they've helped teach them and what you need to do as a parent. There's certain authority you have as a parent, and you just lay down the law and this is how certain things go. Or you're pleasantly surprised that they've taught your children how to peel matoke and prepare their meals in your absence, because they come home at 5, you're coming home at 8, maybe. There's, certain things, there's that discipline. So you have to have systems. Systems and people to support you to just make sure that continues to work. I'll tell you a story that drives it or brings it home around systems. So I had just been appointed chief executive, and I was delivering my first board meeting, and our last son fell sick to the point of requiring admission. The night before, he required admission.
Wow. Okay.
So that thing I was telling you about being the natural caregiver. True. I was with my husband in hospital. He's a Muganda.
So I'm sorry, he was hospitalized the night before the board meeting.
Yes.
So in the morning of the board meeting, he's in the hospital.
Yes.
Okay.
So this is night.
Yes.
Tomorrow morning is my board meeting. So we're in hospital, and the doctor tells us, I'm not releasing this child. He needs to have overnight intravenous treatment. So my husband is a Muganda, and this is best delivered in Uganda. He turned to me and said, Kakati ogenda college. Right then and there, the decision had been made. I was the one staying in hospital. All right? So the decision, and in any case, even I, by the way, had the expectation. Even my son would have looked at me, and if he had to choose, he'd have said, I want to stay with you, Mama, not Tata. So anyhow, there I was. I'm the one staying in hospital. So the negotiations that happened, spoke to my board chair, who was very understanding. And this was right in the middle of COVID also, towards the tail end of COVID. So one thing that COVID had brought on and somewhat normalized was remote or online engagements. Yes. So I requested, I said, unfortunately, our son has been hospitalized. I would like to attend the board meeting virtually and still deliver and still participate. But for that to happen, I needed support in the hospital because he'll need juice, he'll need sponging, he just needs, that care. So what did I do? I got one of our house helps to come and be with me in hospital. One other was at home. So the system didn't break down. So my husband and the 2 kids who needed to go to work and school the next day, the system kept running with a bit of tension because
there's a missing cog.
Sure. Yeah, there's one person here and one person there, but it doesn't grind to a halt. It's just that you're doing a bit of a double shift, where you're doing it together. Now you're doing one part, one is with me in the hospital. So indeed, he was able to go to work. I was able to attend my board meeting because I was in the room. She was with me and attending to the little things like feeding him juice or going to call the nurse and I was able to concentrate and get on with my board meeting. Now, if I had asked to be excused, fine and well. I do know my board chair, he'd have been more than happy. Your child is hospitalized, get somebody to fill in for you. But it would not have, I had just been appointed, it would not have done my start of my assignment any better. And with the way I worked it out, I didn't need to not be there. We just found a way of me appearing virtually, but being engaged, understanding what our directors and stakeholders want us to focus on. A board meeting is critical. The leader of the organization must be there to give accountability of the performance, but also hear firsthand what the key stakeholders are seeing and want to be done. So it's one thing you don't really want to delegate your board meetings or your engagements with your board. So I'm glad that with those systems and support, I was able to remain effective, both as a chief executive, but as a mother. It didn't take away from my presence because somebody was helping sponge my kid. Actually, I remember, and do you have kids yourself?
Yes, of course.
You know what it's like with kids. In the daytime, they have energy, they tend to get sick. So what happened? He became restless and needed to go out for a walk in the hospital, and they had a play area. So she took him to the play area. So most of the time, by the way, he was out playing with his cannula and everything, but he was playing. So he needed somebody. So imagine if I didn't have that support. I'd have either not been on the call or I'd have been disrupted, but there she was. And it didn't make me less of a mother, that somebody was helping whom they've come to have a good relationship and love and are very fond of. When they go and leave, you'd think they've lost somebody. When are these guys coming back? We miss Jackie, we miss Monica, and that type of thing. But these are their friends. So now she was able to help him go play and get whatever sun he needed. I was able to focus and have my board meeting. Later on, I remember my mom came in as well, but quite frankly, she was an added support, but I had a primary support going. So for professional people, men and women, you need to have that support because your efficiency is required at the work. And not that work is not forgiving, but indeed, put in place systems. It can either break down and you're absent and then you have to catch up. So it could have been done with, say, the deputy CEO briefing me on what happened in the board meeting, or the alternative was I was present, both as an executive and as a mother. Is it fully balanced? No. I think I don't believe in is work-life balance. I believe in prioritization. I'm not too sure you ever have the scales evenly matched, but at different times there's a priority. So at the time when I was doing my master's, my executive education was a priority, as family was also a priority. I was pregnant towards the end of my master's. I finished my last exam in December, Feb, I was having this 6-year-old that I was telling you about. So I didn't shut down the family growth plan that, oh no, I'm doing a master's, I can't even have children. No, but it was different. So I timed it in such a way that, okay, so now I'm able to take on pregnancy. I can do 1 semester pregnant, write my exams, and by the time I'm done, it was matching with our life plan. I needed to be done, say, with children by a certain date and move on and focus on other things. So it's different priorities at different times. Was I there for big, say, in social networking, say being in Rotary or being at the golf club, maybe at that time, no. At that point, it was my work, my executive education, and then to the extent that I could spend as much time as I could with my family. So it's what you're prioritizing at different times, and as long as you've justified it, it's in a plan, you've agreed as a partner, with your husband or wife, or as a family, you're comfortable in the decision. So certain things sometimes fall off the grid completely, because I remember the extended family at that point were not seeing me. Because weekends I was at school, weekdays I was working. So the extended family beyond my husband and children and say my parents, cousins, aunties and uncles were not seeing me. But that was what I had to do in that season. Now I'm done. I have a lot more time.
Available.
So now growing my social networks is a priority, because the kids are growing. Our first son will be in boarding school next year. Then 2 years later, so now what happens when you're somewhat empty nesters, the time when they're away from school, where we're hurrying to go home and do revision with them, or make sure that they have the right tutors, or our leaving home time is affected by them being in class by 7:30, sometimes that's open. So what do I do with that time? Maybe I take on another course. Maybe I have more time for my church, actually, and stuff like that. So it's what you're prioritizing at different stages. So those are the two very personal ones, spousal support and systems. Then a big one that cuts across for every professional is what we call the CMS. Your coaches, your mentors, your sponsors. I wish I'd known about it and started with it earlier. And that is your networks. Your net worth is your networks are your net worth. You're as good as your networks. You're as good as your 6 degrees of separation. Within one phone call, how quickly do you get help? Or do you take on a challenge or opportunity or exploit an opportunity? What does your network involve? So you need your coaches who are outside of you, who are seeing what you're not seeing, asking you the right questions, challenging you, and in certain instances, holding you accountable. You said you'd be done with the masters in 2024. It's 2025. What's the story? You understand? They have nothing to lose by asking you. They hold you accountable. They're pushing you. And they could be the same person or they could be different. Mentors, people you admire and look up to, who have necessarily walked the path that you're charting, When I became chief executive, I sought out other chief executives who have been at this longer than me to ask questions, to learn from, to avoid the mistakes that they've made, for instance. When we started coffee farming as a family, we also have now joined an association of people who have been doing the coffee longer than us. There's some mistakes we're not going to make as a result of that association. So find people who are better than you, best in you, people you admire. So it calls for humility. It calls for humility because it's saying, you're better than me. I admire this about you. Can you teach me? Can you hold my hand? Can you show me the ropes? Can you guide me so that I don't make mistakes? And they also have the ability to call out certain things and say, you're doing that wrong, or I need you to be in this space and come and listen to so and so. So the coaching, mentoring, sponsorship journey requires humility because you're submitting yourself to somebody else to grow and support you. Now your sponsors, these are the people who open doors that you walk into. I didn't get to say chief executive on my own. It took somebody mentioning my name in a room where I wasn't, proposing me to be considered for certain roles, for certain... You all need sponsors. You all need that person who's higher than... A sponsor must be at a higher level who can actually open the door and actually lift you up, pull you up. You need those in your lives. You need to seek them. It is you to seek them out. It is you to ingratiate yourself. Sometimes you have the ones who come to you naturally. And if that does happen, it's well and good and very fortunate. But many of the times, you have to cultivate the relationships and be deliberate. You have to be available as well. A key tip, never approach a coach, mentor, or sponsor without a gift. Find ways of adding value to them. You have ways that you can add value. You can sometimes ask, how may I be of help? Sometimes it need not be transactional. Sometimes you're checking in them and asking them, or you read something and say, oh, by the way, I'm able to support with this, or I heard this, or I found this book and I thought about you. You need to add value to them to remain top of mind as well. So that is not transactional, and it's more blessed to give than to receive. In the giving, you'll definitely receive. In the giving, you will definitely receive. So think, how are you adding value in your coach, mentoring, and sponsoring relationships. That I wish I had started much earlier. There's no glory in I can do it all by myself. No, God created us as social animals, social beings, to live together, work together, support each other. So as you're being helped, are you helping others? Are you also opening doors and letting others through? What you're learning, what you're experiencing, teach it to others, do unto others as well, so that you are a river and not a reservoir. A reservoir becomes stale. If you get all these things poured into you and it's all about me, you become stale. But if you're refreshing others, you too will be refreshed. So it continues. It's a river. You say a river, our river Nile is fresh, it keeps going. Never mind the pollution issues and what have you, but take the analogy. But to be rivers and not reservoirs. And as they say paying it forward, but as it's being done to you, do the same. You've got to be deliberate. Are you coaching? Are you mentoring? Are you sponsoring others? Never underestimate the level of sponsorship you have. So somebody else can invite you to a very big board. Your level of sponsorship might just be getting someone into a primary school. Find a way of using your resources to benefit other people. So those are the three things I would really focus on. Spousal support, partner support, that's the critical one. Your spouse, it's important. That your spouse is about the closest person you'll ever live with, and what they say
and
or
longest.
don't say. If they don't encourage you sometimes, it's also, if your nearest and dearest is not pointing out the best things about you, it might also hinder you. Or if they're discouraging you, or if they're looking out for you. So what your spouse, your attitude towards each other is critical. I can't overemphasize it. You're each other's best supporters or greatest enemies. So purpose to be each other's greatest support. So what they say and don't say, sometimes it's not the criticism that you want. Maybe if it's criticism that you had, maybe you need to keep quiet. Maybe that's not what I need to hear at this point. I need to just keep going. So what they say and don't say, so spousal support, big. Systems and social and domestic support is critical to keep you efficient, because you must be viable, you must be delivering, you must be performing. So that, and then the coaching, mentoring, and supporting, and sponsoring, the CMS agenda is quite big. Those are the three.
Are there some rooms that you've gone to, maybe with your partners or the affiliates, where you feel that because you're a lady, you are getting maybe less than treatment?
I must say no, genuinely. I haven't. I studied in a mixed school.
And this is not because your partners will be able to hear this?
No. I think I'm in a bit of a unique situation, or the sector is more embracing of women. I don't know. If it has even been done to me, I may have missed it. I may have missed it. I think if there have been limitations, it's been about a certain limitation that is not different to the next man at the table. Maybe it has been imposter syndrome and you're feeling it, and even the men at the table are feeling it. But I've never quite experienced...
You do feel that a lot? Or you did in the beginning?
You never... I don't think you ever quit from imposter syndrome, especially if your CMS network is working. Someone is always pulling you to the next level, and you're asking yourself,
you can do
what
it.
am I
Just
doing
come.
here?
Yeah, you can do it.
You look at the gurus at the table around you, and you're like, how did I get here? What am I doing here? And then you get on, and then you start delivering, and then, okay, I can do it. So if the CMS is working, you should be feeling the imposter syndrome frequently, because you must be being stretched.
Yes.
So if there's no stretch and it's business as usual, if you're not feeling the imposter syndrome frequently, maybe you're not being sharpened, you're not being challenged. So I think that one never leaves. But so I think it's more been the imposter syndrome in general than I would say because I was a lady. No, I've also I've not quite felt that. I've also grown up engaging quite easily and frequently with men in the family, but also the school I went to, Buganda Road. Then I was in Gayaza, that's a single sex. Then university, it's mixed. And I think maybe in the family, I got used to engaging with men. I don't see that. But not to say, by the way, that women don't suffer it. But at a personal level, I wouldn't say I've faced that prejudice simply because I was a woman. Then, having lived most of my life and working life in Uganda, in Africa, I also haven't faced the race one. So that I know about it theoretically. I suppose this might be the case for women who have grown up in the urban areas, because your schooling, you're getting pretty much the same treatment as the male counterparts. It's the ones growing up in the countryside, that caregiving work that I'm talking about, that go fetch water, do some cooking before you go to school. Those kind of things that have. Would you say that the hospital episode I had with my husband is one such, where I'm the one who stayed behind? I wouldn't say that. You see, I don't look at, especially because we solutioned around it. And to be honest, I think I'd do better at that type of nurturing. Yeah, so I wouldn't, for instance, using that example, I wouldn't want to say, why was it you who stayed and not him? I don't know whether the bias is so in me that I don't see it, but no. I don't see it for what, but I see if there had been an absence of systems, I can see how it would have affected us both anyway. True. Because I'd have been disrupted, he'd have been disrupted. So would I have taken the support from home? Then it would have affected how he got ready and got the other kids ready for school. So I feel like that one would have been us. So maybe is this urban privilege, if you like, that story is not really felt by women, I think, in the urban spaces, growing up in the urban middle class spaces. I think it's felt more by our sisters in the countryside, I would think. Pay disparity, I'm not too sure that I've faced that one. I'm not too sure because I've never always seen it. But I feel like even where my predecessors have been, we've matched the same, but I know there's a pay disparity, but I'm not too sure in Uganda that we face that. I stand to be corrected, that doing the same exact job, a woman earns less than a man. If it does, it might be down to poor negotiation in general, but not that it has been institutionalized. But one would have to check the data and see. I'm suspicious that male CEOs might be pipping us. For instance, male CEOs might be pipping female CEOs. Sometimes I think we're not as cutthroat as we should be in the negotiation. But I feel that that's more to do with the negotiation than it is about the institution making a shorter
deliberate.
Yes. So for women, I would say we need to get stronger and better at negotiation. This time I was chatting with a friend of mine recently, and I think he was considering employment, and I remember proposing a sum that he should ask, and he was like, "Why? No, I'm going for this."
Which was higher.
So our natural tendency sometimes is to be a lot more cautious, want to stay on the table, don't want to seem too high. And then I find that men, you're more gutsy in terms of let's go, let's highball this.
Let's see what happens.
Yes, let's see what happens. I think us in terms of risk management, I really want to get this job. It's good for the stability of my family. Not that you men don't, but I think in terms of risk management, we tend to be a bit more cautious. I find that men tend to be a bit more aggressive. So maybe that would help. I think if there is a disparity, especially around the pay gap, I think it would be for our holding back in the negotiation. And I think maybe that's where the imposter syndrome comes in, and not seeing how good we could be or what we command. That I concede. So if there's those kind of gap, and I guess the market will play. They're not going to fall all over themselves to do what you need to ask for.
You need to increase.
And so it might come out as unfair but we're doing the same job. How come he got? Well, he negotiated more. So to the extent that employers can have certain bands to even out those things, it would help to somewhat standardize. But I know in competitive places of work, your negotiation, as it is in life, as it is in business, your negotiation has a part to play in what you earn or keep for yourself.
True.
Yeah.
For a young lady who aspires to be in your position, what is a shortcut using the CMS? What would you advise them to do today to see that they can be in your position in future?
One, get rid of that word shortcuts. Work smart, but shortcuts tend to end up being long cuts. One, I would say focus and keep the main thing the main thing. And here's what I mean. At different stages, there's something that is incumbent and critical for you to get through. There's a stage when it's your academics. Get your best grades possible. From primary school, secondary school, to your bachelor's. For young people who are not yet working, at that point, your academics are the best thing you can do with yourself. That's your ticket. That's your ticket. I think every parent, guardian, sponsor, when they're paying fees for a child or children, the biggest return on investment is them acing it as best as they can. And I also don't want to misuse, as long as you're doing the best as you can, compare yourselves to your peers. And as I said, aspire. And, iron sharpens iron. Aspire to be in the top 3, 5, 10, 15. You understand? So my best is 50%, that's mediocre. Okay? Aspire and work hard, work smart. Work in associations. Do not do the Lone Ranger. Associate with the best, better, good ones. Get into the study groups. Make them your company. Find people whose values resonate with yours. So there's the work hard, work smart, aspire to be ahead. Don't go for, the bell curve. Strive to be in the 5% that is doing well. Leave mediocre. There's enough people who are going to be mediocre. Purpose not to be mediocre. So that's your academics. Improve your soft skills. So they're still in the learning phase. Public speaking, financial literacy are quite critical. Those kind of soft skills, they need to polish them. Because at some point, that public speaking, your financial literacy, what you do with your money later, also gets you out of the rat race into financial prosperity. So the earlier you start, the better. Pick up other soft skills. Join Interact, Rotaract, Toastmasters. Start building a social network. Right out of school, be in some of those social clubs, the tennis club, the debate club, the Interact club, the Toastmasters club. Be there, because life is not lived in one dimension of academics at different times. We're telling our children, we have a candidate son this year, and we're telling him he's going to keep up his swimming, because life is not lived in one dimension. You've got to learn to be able to. And the physical capital is critical. I'll come to the different capitals that they should focus on. So I'm now first speaking to the youngins. Then when you join your professional working life, purpose to be good and to learn. Learn and apply and work hard. Be about results and not results. People will assign, to people that do well, they get more work. So the reward for doing well is more work. Do not complain. You will be recognized. Do your work excellently. Now, at that point, you've started seriously developing a CMS network. Your coach, your mentors, your sponsors. As soon as you get into the workspace, but anyway, from about high school, you need to be having the coach, mentor, sponsor space. Keep working that CMS space as you do your work professionally. Develop yourself professionally and develop yourself personally, but your professional work. If you have the first degree, get a second one. You yourself told me you have 2 master's degrees. So improve your knowledge. Be a lifelong learner. Some of it is formal, some of it is informal. You were asking me about podcasts. Be on podcasts, listen to books, read short articles. Be a consumer of information, a lifelong student. Stay foolish, stay humble. You don't know everything, so keep learning. And as I've said, now the CMS network is pretty much a constant. Then I'd like to wrap it all up by focusing on the 5 capitals, the 5 growth capitals. I don't know if you're familiar with them. Spiritual capital, social capital, physical capital, intellectual capital, and financial capital. Spiritual capital being the paramount and most important one. You need your anchoring in God. You need your anchoring in God. Spend time in prayer, in the Word. In my case, I'm a Christian, so for me, it is spending time in community. church community, your pastors, your shepherds, your leaders who feed you, who guide you, and over and above your own personal study and your relationship with God. God blesses and keeps you through his people as well. So your community, your shepherds, your community whom you do. In our church, Worship Harvest, for instance, we have what we call missional communities. Life is lived in the missional community. We are not islands. So we read the Bible together, study together, and that type of thing. So you're thriving spiritually. Right now, I'm in a season where I'm listening to my Bible audially as I go to work. I'm using my work commute, and I'm using a dramatized version. So I'm in the New Testament, and it's interesting to hear Paul quarreling with the saints and that type of thing. But anyway, so you've got to even find a way of making this thing interesting and sustainable. So your spiritual capital is critical. It gives you grounding. It does give you salvation. Indeed, we serve a merciful God who gives you wisdom liberally, who brings you people in your path, who heals you, who keeps you well, blesses your plans, the works of your hands. That cannot be discounted. I'd be lying, by the way, if I was saying I was self-made and that God didn't have a hand in me. I can clearly look at my life and I say, why me, why not so and so? Or even if I do not compare it, and you just see that surely this was not all me. This definitely is the hand of God. We believe in, for instance, tithing and fast fruits. And tithing is your sustenance, fast fruits is for your promotion. And there are things I look back and I say, this was surely God promoting me and blessing me and being kind to me. So your spiritual capital is key. If you don't have a relationship with God, you're missing heaven on earth. And that's the first one you need to sort out. So I'd be happy to help anybody on that path as well. So there's the spiritual capital. Then you have, I'll start with physical capital as well. How we look after ourselves. Are we exercising? Ensuring that at least 3 to 5 times a week you're having cardiovascular activity of about 30 minutes. You're minding your weight, your diet, so that we avoid the lifestyle diseases like high blood pressure, hypertension, diabetes, and that type of thing. The kind of diet that we're having, eating your fruit as opposed to drinking it, your 2 liters of water a day, cutting out processed foods, cutting out sugar, all those things. You've got to be deliberate. Now, those are some things that you're living with all the time. You can't afford to stop them, or if you do, the consequences are very clear. Your physical capital will mean, are you available in class? Are you available at school? So I'm speaking to the school-going child or student. I'm speaking to the working professional. You want to be healthy. You want to make your health insurance redundant. Go for your annual health checks. That one I must emphasize. Have your baselines, because it's those annual baselines at a minimum that keep you you're borderline diabetic, you need to cut these things out. I know many people who have been found borderline this and they made improvements. Or obesity. You don't think you're obese, and for tall people, such as myself, there's this myth of you carry your weight well. You're either within your body range,
BMI,
your BMI, body mass index, or not. Those things are important, and you pay for it, or you will accrue a good life and advantages depending on the choices that you make. Remind me to talk about choices as well as a key important thing. So we've left physical capital, spiritual capital, physical capital, intellectual capital. A lifelong student, stay humble, stay foolish, be a lifelong learner. Listen more than you speak. Let people finish their sentences. Pause. Ask intelligent questions. When you're presented with new information, don't be dogmatic. Consider new information and try and reflect on it and see whether it changes your mind or not. But don't throw out things without considering them. And you become this way when you expose yourself to new material. You say, oh my goodness, I never knew this. I never knew that. The other day I was listening to a book about why we sleep. And apparently, when we're newborns, there's a tendency to sleep as we're growing and developing. And then it happens again when children are teenagers. There's a growth spurt happening. So your teenager is not just being lazy. Their body is actually compelling them to sleep. at the time when they're also expected to be very active. So instead of having a tantrum with your child about, I don't understand why you children now don't wake up early, now you see that's new knowledge of, okay, so these kids are not just being lazy, their bodies are actually putting that demand on them. And I don't know if you've experienced that.
As you're saying that, I'm looking back and I'm saying, my kids, they love those long sleeps.
And then they'll get out of it. But at the same time...
And they are actually in their growth phases right now.
Exactly. And while that is happening, you help them manage. So guys, we need to be in bed by 8. You need your 8 hours of sleep. I'll be waking you up at 5. That's why I'm telling you to sleep, because if you don't, so you also engage them. But you see, that's new information that I got by listening to a book.
I'm getting now also.
Exactly. So be open and find ways of consuming this information that is realistic and simple. We're now in the age of digital. How do you use your traffic jam? Are you cussing other traffic users, or are you now listening to a book? I also listen for some entertainment. I'm listening to a Jeffrey Archer among some of the books, the Clifton series, and you learn new turns of phrase. Just generally, you even relax, you decompress, or then sometimes you don't have the appetite for a book. You listen to a short podcast, you go on 10 talks. Just find ways of consuming my Bible. I'm listening to my Bible because I needed to do my Bible study. But at the same time, I need to wake up, do my exercise, beat Kampala traffic, be in the office. I needed to find a way. So listen to the word. And if I'm saying that I prioritize God, can he be the first person I listen to if we're calling him a person? But can I, so I say, so the first part of my day will be to listening to God's word. Then thereafter, I can add all these other things. So your intellectual capital has to grow. In conversations, the spaces that you're going to be invited to, you better have value to add. Something to add to the conversation. Much as you're learning, you see iron sharpens iron. So don't be wood that is trying to be sharpened by iron. Be that iron as well. So have something that is also... adding. So now we're going to social capital. You're the average of the 5 people that you spend most time with. So who are those 5 people? Look at them. Are you adding value? Are they adding value? Are your values resonating? That type of thing. So that's a critical thing. Your network is your net worth. Within 5-6 phone calls, can you reach the president, relevant ministers, relevant stakeholders? Whom can you reach? In your group of 5-10, think of your network. What's the biggest opportunity you, as a network of friends, can you put together? Can you take advantage of? So can I bring you guys $1 million, an investment to consider, or can I bring you 10 million? Because 10 million, that's what you can afford is 2 million. Or can you afford 100 million? Or if there's a challenge, what kind of challenge can you solve? Are you able, at the drop of a hat, without having to take a loan, free cash flows, what type of challenge can you solve? A 500,000 problem, a 100,000 problem, a 2 million problem, a 5 million problem? You know that, God forbid, you're bereaved. Can you start off the affairs and say, I've got 20 million?
True.
And then whatever other support I get, or are you also waiting for support?
And another thing that people, I think, need to consider or know in this age. Previously, it was the 5 physical people next to you. But now it could be 5 digital people.
Exactly.
If there is Jeffrey Archer, for example, that you're listening to religiously, and he has maybe 30 series that you're listening to, that is a person that is impacting you. And that is one of the 5 people that is now impacting you, because you're spending a significant time of your day, 1 hour going, maybe really 2 hours going and 2 hours coming back, and you're putting this man's words in your mind.
Exactly.
Right? And then maybe you have another one, podcast that you listen to, doing the same thing. So those are working on your brain.
Exactly. They're influencing you. But I also really, I was challenging my team, and we thought about it in great detail of what opportunity can my 5 closest people and I, or even as a person, what's the biggest opportunity I can exploit as a person? And then when you realize, I'm only good for 10 million, I need to move.
True.
You know, when you ask yourself, for all this work later and all this intelligence and everything, the most I can exploit at the drop of a hat is 5 million or 100,000. Then you say, okay, fine. Thank you, God. This is where I'm at. I need to move. And then you start to work towards that.
you have the 5 groups, and you feel you have grown out of these 5 people, but you have not yet reached the level that you want to get to. You're in this limbo right here. People are scared of this limbo. They want to fall back to what they're used to. They don't want the change. But they have to be resilient in this limbo, because the person who is up here, your CMS, is going to hold you and pull you up. Once they see what you're doing, they say, let me help you. This is a PT help, PT assistance. Let me pull this person up. But once people realize that, they are moving out of these 5 core and they are now in this space, and they are not really touching this person up here, they tend to go back down here. They say,
Comfort zone.
Comfort zone, what they're used to.
Yes, the learning zone is full of stretch, but it also comes with humility. Remember, that's the part I said, you have to humble yourself and go and say, I'm at this level. I see you're at the 200 million level. I want to learn from you. Can I learn from you? That's where humility comes in. Some of them are out of reach. So you're reading their books. I'm reading the Sheikh CEO about Sheikh Mo of Dubai. And so I'm learning from him without him ever being in my space. So there's that type of learning, but there's the humbling of oneself and going and saying, I need help. This is, I want to learn to do big things or bigger exploits. And they'll give you assignments, they'll recommend you, but at the heart of that is, yes, some of them can pull you on their own volition, but many times you may need to impress. So it requires humility and saying, I've done well, could do better, so-and-so is better. You acknowledge it, you go and tell them, and you ask their help, and hopefully they have the time for that. So that's the social capital. The last one, and these other 3, there's spiritual and financial. Those ones are in first and last. You'd be surprised. Financial capital is the least of the 5 capitals. These 3, you can play with them how you want at different stages. So for a kid, for students, the intellectual property would come quickly because, they're being graded and that type of thing before they think social network. And they're physical, they're doing PE, how they look, all that. So the last one is the finance. It's a finance, and it's deliberately there. So in the order of these 3, depends on the stage of life. The one constant is your spiritual capital. The least one is your financial capital. When you have these 3 working, money is definitely going to follow you. You're going to be a good employee. You're going to be a good entrepreneur. You're going to, excellent even, employee, mother, entrepreneur, parent, because you're learning, you're growing. There's this network you're part of. God is blessing you. He's guiding you. You're physically fit. You're in the right circles. You're being challenged. You're socially engaged with your community. Why won't finances follow you? With promotion. And when the finances come, you have to be a good steward. And based on my spiritual orientation, from the Christian orientation, you're tithing. That's your 10%. And you're doing your first fruits. Then, for instance, we have a formula in our church that was taught to us by a pastor, Apostle Moses Mukisa. It's the 10, 20, 10, 20, 10, 10, yes, 10, 10, 20, 60. 10 is what goes to God. Your tithe, your first fruits, your generosity to God. You need a generosity budget, 10%. That value that I was telling you that you're going to add within your social capital has to be funded. People's birthdays, people's kwanjulas, weddings, it has to be within a budget. If you leave it amorphous, today you're giving 5 million, today you're trying to build, but you're not giving 5 million. Meanwhile, it's compromised in this call if there's no budget for it. So you have a budget, 10%. That's your giving generosity budget. So that you're effectively generous and giving and affecting other people's lives. You're sending people to school. You're buying a meal for somebody who hasn't had something to eat. There's a budget and it is defined and you're using it and you're applying it. You're being generous to the people around you, to society. That's the one that you use. 20%, and increasingly, it gets bigger. You must save and invest 20% of anything that is called an income. If you have 10 streams of income and you can live off one and the rest are busy being multiplied and invested, that's good. If it's a salary, whatever you do, 20% at a minimum must be saved and invested. Not just saved, invested. Hence, your unit trusts, like the Stanbic unit trust. Some people have investment clubs. Those are quick ideas that come to mind. Your 20%, it not only must be being saved, it must be being invested. Depending on your risk appetite, other people are in real estate, other people are buying some stocks and equity, other people are taking a more collective approach, like the Stanbic unit trust that I was talking about, where a fund manager like Stanbic is doing that for you and managing and taking that investment risk and giving you returns of between 10 and I believe 12% per annum. Steady, good growth. And your money is growing over and above your Provident Fund and the National Social Security Pension Fund more. The more you can increase that, the better for you. Then you're living off 60%. You make sure that your living expenses are within your 60%. And as the resource envelope grows, you'll find that you'll start putting more in the 10. You might make you might go into 15, 30, 40. You want to build your war chest around savings and investments because you want to have some cash when somebody comes and says, let's go start a business and we each need to put 100 million, you have it, to take that thing. And then you're decreasing. If your expenses grow with your income, then you're doing life the wrong way. At a certain point, your expenses must be capped. Regardless, you need to get to a quality of life where you're comfortable that if you suddenly find yourself with $1 million, it doesn't really change your thermostat. The same food you've been eating will suffice. At a certain point, once you can afford to buy food in a certain restaurant, whether you have $1 million or 10 million, the high-end food will be 100,000. You can afford that, and you never go past that really, except for your exceptional celebrations or this or that. So you have to have that point where you get to some comfort level and contentment and say, yes, we have the number of cars that we can drive. We're living in our home. I cannot have 100 handbags. Or you cap it so that your expenses now almost stagnate and your investment income is growing. Your investment arsenal is growing. You're increasingly, with your prosperity, you're increasingly becoming generous. You understand? You know the Mugaga thing.
Yes.
Mugaga says it's because they've set aside more money. So where previously you were supporting some initiatives to the tune of 1 million, suddenly you can pay school fees worth 10 million. Your generosity budget has grown. What you're doing for God's work has grown. You understand? So so these pots get bigger. And you can never outgive God. The more you give God, the more He blesses you. So, but then your expenses have, and then meanwhile your physical capital is good. So you're not even going to hospital. You're not paying hectic bills, but you have health insurance. All those things are catered for, and everything. So with that formula for the financial capital, how would you
not thrive,
grow and succeed? And no income level should be despised. If it is 500,000, I'm telling the people who have just started working, if it is 500,000 or $1 million shillings that you're earning, please apply that 10, 20, 60% rule. Please apply it. It will work. Yes, even you with 500,000, you can afford to be generous to somebody. That's 50,000. Maybe you're giving back to your parents who put you through school. You're sending them something, or you're doing some shopping, or you're buying the umeme at home.
Of course.
The power. You understand? You can afford to be generous at every level and stage of your life. That way, money doesn't own you. It doesn't have a hold of you. It's the other way around. And of course, there's broadening your streams of income. Broaden your streams of income. That's what I'd summarize as.
You mentioned something about choice.
Choice, yes. I think we must teach young people and adults alike earlier that choice has consequences, good or bad, that accrue to you. So truly think about your actions, your deeds, and your words. Be, very deliberate of, this is the choice I'm making, and these are the consequences that could accrue, good or bad. And people should learn to take accountability for the choices they made and not shark blame. Whenever you say yes to something, you're likely saying no to
something else, yes.
So choose and think and consult. Even as you make choices, the CMS, consult, stay foolish, stay humble, ask, consult trusted people, your parents, your friends, advisors, your mentors. You know, I'm faced with this decision. What can I do? Do I get married now, or do I go do my master's and come back? You know, don't take the decision alone. Someone can say, are the two mutually exclusive? Like in my case, did I have to do my master's physically abroad, or could I get the knowledge here? You know, someone just asks you that, oh, what makes you think the two are mutually exclusive? Oh, okay.
Then you take pause.
So, or maybe you can afford it, you're young, you're 21, go do your master's, is he willing to wait? You know, those kind of, but consult. Yes, consult God, and also God will bring you the right people.
There's a school of thought that says that when you decide not to do something, when you choose not to do something, you're choosing to do something else.
Yes.
In that moment.
Yes.
If you decide not to exercise,
Yes.
you're deciding to get
sleep more.
overweight.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
If you decide not to invest, you're deciding to be poor.
Yes. Decide not to study.
There is
play.
no individual decision.
Yes. Yeah.
So, Mona, first of all, I want to thank you for coming on the show. I know you were very highly recommended, but after talking to you, I have learned a lot in this discussion. I'm sure our viewers have also learned a lot. It has been very exciting for me. I had heard about aBi Finance. I didn't actually know the nitty-gritty, but you broke it down very well for us, and I really appreciate that. I want to wish you great success in the work that you're doing, continued growth, get more stakeholders, get more partners, and everything. And we really wish you success in your work.
Thank you very much for having me. I've enjoyed our conversation. It's been rather broad, went professional, then went personal, and also inspirational, like messages to the up and coming generation. So I thank you very much for the time and for curating an interesting conversation. You're only as good as who you're chatting to.
Your partner on the other side.
Yes. So thank you very much for the privilege of your time and for the consideration. I do not take it for granted. And on behalf of aBi, we thank you for the platform. And let's all do our bit wherever we can, following especially the 5 growth capitals. I think that's where I'd wrap it up from a personal level, because from the personal springs the public persona. So if we could just embrace the 5 growth capitals and see what it means in everybody's individual life, and then see from this whole conversation what they want to take away and run with and improve and make better. But may we all stay foolish, stay humble, and be lifelong learners. Thank you very much.